Have you ever stood in front of the mirror, ready to make a change, but froze the moment you imagined sitting in that salon chair, trying to explain what you actually want? You're not alone. Because deciding to get a haircut is one thing. Knowing how to ask for the right one, especially when you have fine hair over 60, that's an entirely different challenge. The other day, my old printer whirred to life, and I stood there for a moment, just listening to it. It's a sound you don't hear much anymore. A few minutes later, I was holding one of the comments you left after our last chat about my hair. I had to put on my reading glasses, of course, to read them all properly. And as I did, a pattern began to emerge from your kind words. I realized the question wasn't just about the haircut anymore. It was about the conversation. So many of you are now considering layers, which is wonderful. But there's a quiet panic that comes next, isn't there? That feeling of, what on earth do I actually say to the person with the scissors? Many of you are looking for specific guidance on haircuts for women over 60 with fine hair, and you're afraid of getting it wrong. It became so clear to me that deciding to do something is only the first step. Figuring out how to do it well, how to have that conversation with your stylist, that's the part that requires a map. Because, as I've learned from experience, a vague wish often leads to a disappointing haircut. So today, I thought we could create that map together. We'll talk about what to consider, what to ask for, and how to find a style that truly fits you. You'll hear about real layering techniques, gentle solutions for flat crowns, and how to avoid the most common mistake we all make at the salon. And if you stay with me through the end, I'll share the one layer no stylist can cut, but it quietly changes everything about how your haircut looks, feels, and lives on your face. Let's begin. That disappointing item is, of course, the photograph. You know the one. That slick, glossy page, torn carefully from a magazine at the doctor's office, or maybe saved on your phone from Pinterest 3 years ago. It's a picture of an actress who is 28 years old, standing under perfect lighting, with hair that was likely worked on for 3 hours by a team of professionals. We've all done it. We tuck it in our purse, feeling that little thrill of hope, and present it to our stylist as if it's a treasure map. I wish I could say I've never done it, but that would be a lie. There was a time in the 90-second I was convinced I could look like a certain sitcom star. The result, I assure you, was more alarming than amusing, and my husband, bless him, was too scared to say anything for at least 3 days. But here's the truth. A photograph is an idea, not an instruction manual. That young woman's hair texture isn't your hair texture. Her bone structure isn't yours. And her lifestyle with stylists on call certainly isn't mine. When we ask to look like someone else, we're not just setting ourselves up for disappointment. We're asking our stylist to perform magic, not hairstyling. And the thing about magic is, it disappears the moment you get home and try to recreate it with your own 2 hands. It makes me wonder, what was a rule about appearance you used to follow without even thinking about it? I'd love to hear your answer in the comments, because the goal isn't to chase a fantasy. It's to begin an honest conversation about what will make you look and feel your best. And once we've gently folded that picture and slipped it back in our purse, we can finally start that real conversation. So let's begin with the gentlest approach. It's for those of us who want something softer, something new without losing who we are. My dear friend Margaret was beside herself with worry before her son's wedding last spring. She has this beautiful long silver hair that falls past her shoulders. And her biggest fear was walking into that ceremony with what she called a fussy haircut. She didn't want anything dramatic. No choppy ends, no trendy shapes. She just wanted to look like herself, but with a bit more life. For someone like Margaret, someone who's attached to her length but quietly aware that things have started to feel heavy, long, blended layers, can be a quiet miracle. This isn't about changing your identity. It's about adding movement where things have settled. And when done well, you won't even notice the layers when your hair is still. But then, when you walk, when you turn your head, your hair catches the light in soft, unexpected ways. It moves as one piece, but there's an underlying current now, like the difference between standing water and a quiet stream. That's the beauty of long, blended layers. They take out the interior weight without touching the outer shape. And for those of us with fine hair, that means volume without frizz, movement without sacrificing that comforting length. One important note: when you talk to your stylist, ask to keep the layers long and soft, and to avoid layering too much around the crown, especially if you're concerned about dryness or frizz. The magic is in the mid-lengths and ends. It's more about suggestion than structure. A gentle persuasion rather than a full-blown makeover. Margaret walked into that wedding looking just like herself, but lighter, more luminous. And I could see it in the way she held her posture that day. The kind of change that doesn't scream, but quietly insists. That's a lovely solution for long hair. But what if you've already gone shorter? And your main concern isn't length. It's that flat, heavy feeling right at the back of your head. Let me tell you about the woman I saw in a dentist's waiting room. Because her haircut changed the way I think about structure altogether. I was in the waiting room at the dentist's office a few months ago. You know that particular stillness in those places, where the lights buzz faintly and no one quite makes eye contact. A woman was called, and as she stood up, I first noticed her posture, tall, composed. But then, as she walked away, I saw the back of her hair, and it stopped me mid-page in the magazine I was pretending to read. It was one of those layered bob haircuts for over 60 clean in the front, but the real story was in the back. The layers were stacked so precisely that they almost looked architectural. It was soft, elegant, and structured all at once. This is what stylists call a stacked bob. A style especially helpful if you're dealing with a flat crown haircut over 60. The technique is clever. Short layers are cut at the nape, and each one builds upon the next, getting slightly longer as you move upward. The result? A gentle wedge of volume that holds its shape even after you've run errands, braved a little wind, or napped on the couch. It lifts the entire silhouette of the head, quietly but powerfully. It reminded me that elegance doesn't always announce itself from the front. Sometimes, it's what's happening behind you that leaves the real impression. One note of caution. This kind of cut requires precision, so make sure your stylist is experienced with stacked shapes. When done well, it's a wash-and-go style that looks polished with very little effort. Have you ever asked to see the back of your haircut while you were still in the chair? Most of us don't. But sometimes, the back says more than the front ever could. Now this stack style is fantastic if your hair can hold shape on its own. But what if your hair is truly fine? The kind where you worry that any layers at all will just make it look stringy, flat, or worse, transparent at the ends? There's a little-known technique for that. And I'll tell you exactly how it works, because it changed the way I wear my own hair. I remember vividly the day I finally decided to try layers. And I remember just as clearly the fear that came with it. I'm worried. I told my stylist that it'll look stringy at the ends, that you'll see right through it. She didn't flinch. She smiled and said something I'll never forget. "Carol, we're not going to touch the perimeter. We're going to build the architecture on the inside, where no one can see the beams." She took a section of my hair, lifted it gently, and explained. The top layer would remain mostly solid. All the cutting, the real work, would happen underneath. This technique is often called internal layering or invisible layering. It's especially powerful for women with fine, fragile hair after 60, the kind that needs movement but can't afford to lose visual fullness. Here's how it works. The stylist lifts the top section of your hair out of the way, then cuts shorter supporting layers underneath. Once the top is laid back down, it hides everything beneath, but those hidden layers give the whole shape, lift, flow, and movement. It's structure without visible seams. It's volume by stealth. And the best part? The ends stay looking solid. You don't get that see-through look that makes fine hair feel thinner than it is. The day she finished cutting mine, she held up a section against the light. It looked the same from the outside, but it felt lighter, stronger, like my hair had a secret. And that's exactly what it was. A secret structure built just for me. But as brilliant as these techniques are, the long, blended layers, the structured bob, the invisible foundations, they're all just tools. Because there's one more layer we haven't talked about yet. And it's the one no stylist, no matter how gifted, can cut for you. All of these techniques, the blended lengths, the architectural stack, the hidden foundations, they're wonderful, practical, elegant. They solve real problems. But they're all in service of something bigger. There's one layer no stylist can cut for you. And without it, even the best haircut in the world can fall flat, both literally and emotionally. That layer is your own confidence. Think of it this way. A beautiful haircut is like a book with a stunning, artfully designed cover. But if that book just sits on a shelf, spine in, never opened, never read, does the cover truly matter? It's the story inside that gives the cover its meaning. And it's the woman inside the haircut that gives it its life. You can have the most technically perfect cut imaginable. But if you walk through your day with your shoulders hunched and your eyes lowered, the haircut is invisible. It becomes just hair. Because the most beautiful haircut looks limp on a woman who is trying to hide. The real transformation happens the moment you decide to inhabit your space. When you pull your shoulders back, when you lift your chin, not in arrogance but in quiet certainty, when you show up in the world as if you belong there, because you do, that's when the layers catch the light. That's when your haircut starts moving with you. Not to mask you, not to impress, but to reflect who you've chosen to be. The haircut doesn't give you confidence. It's just the uniform for the confidence you've already decided to claim. It's the outside catching up with the inside. And that, more than anything else, is what gives a style its power. So, that is our map. It starts by putting away the fantasy, that perfectly lit photograph of someone else, and instead, beginning a real, honest conversation. First with ourselves, then with a stylist we trust. It's about understanding that there are options, real ones, for fine hair, silver hair, thinning crowns, or simply hair that feels tired. Whether it's long, blended layers, a subtle architectural stack, or internal structure that no one can see, but everyone can feel. There's a solution that will work with your hair, not against it. But most of all, It's about remembering that the final, most important layer is you. Your energy, your movement, your willingness to take up space and be seen. That's what gives your haircut its true shape. The rest, the shape, the shears, the styling cream, those are just details. Helpful ones, yes, but still just details. And I hope that after today, those details feel a little less overwhelming and a little more empowering. Now I'd love to hear from you. What's one question you've always wanted to ask a hairdresser, but maybe felt too shy to bring up? You might be surprised how many of us are wondering the same thing. And if you've ever looked in the mirror and thought, why is the top of my head so flat no matter what I do? Then make sure you don't miss the next video. We'll talk about exactly that. Flat crown. These 4 haircuts create instant volume without teasing. I'll see you there.